Well, hello there, Imagination Connoisseurs, and welcome to another Road Trippin' with RMB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bodden, and you're listening to our podcast for Wednesday, June 8th, 2022. We're glad you're here. As you know, Robert Meyer Burnett and I talk almost every day, Monday through Friday, on the phone while he's on the road to the John Campea studio, where he and the rest of the Campea crew record all that delicious YouTube goodness that you guys like to consume. The John Campea Show, the Movie Club, the Mailbag, all of those kind of shows. Well, while Rob is busy talking with John Campea and friends about entertainment, he and I talk about pretty much everything else and sometimes some entertainment. Today's episode isn't a whole lot different, other than we take a more, what should we say, philosophical approach about the popularity of TV shows and movies today versus in eras of the past. Why is it that some shows have stronger memories with us, and mostly shows from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even the 90s, but the more recent shows, no matter how good they are we still going to remember them in years to come? It's an interesting question, and it was posed by Imagination Connoisseur Omar94, who also writes into all the other PGS shows that we produce. But it's a great question, and we thank Omar for that. I think you're going to find Rob's observations to be spot on. I tried to throw in a couple things of value. We'll see how that goes. It is a shorter than usual show. We've had a couple long ones, so we're trying to give you a break. This one only goes about 40 minutes, but I hope you find it entertaining. And like all of our shows, it does start with a phone call. Cue the dial tone.
Well, good morning, Mr. Bodden. I am not driving west on the 10 right now because this morning is Wednesday, so Chris Carr and Aaron Cummings are on the John Campea Show.
Oh, it's ladies' night on the John Campea Show today.
Yeah,
apparently.
It is the ladies' night. I mean, the two of them together are a dangerous combination, a dangerous concoction.
The mind
God wants them all to himself.
That's right. The mind goes in places that we just cannot discuss if we want to continue to monetize this podcast.
Well, you said it, I didn't.
Well, that's good. So we get to have a boys' night out then. I'm all for that. So
there you go.
Unfortunately, I will have to keep an eye on the time. As you know, I've got a couple business meetings this afternoon, so in order to be able to get all this wrapped up, we're only on for about 35 to 45 minutes, if you don't mind.
All right.
All right.
Let's fire it up.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you what. The best way to fire it up, I think, is to start with a letter that we received yesterday from Omar. Omar, who, without fail, writes into you and Dieter on your Let's Get Physical Media show, sure. And he shares a number of other letters and thoughts with you on our observations. It's kind of nice to have a familiar face writing to us here on the podcast. So, Omar, thank you so much for the letter. And as you know, I usually make Omar write a headline for his own letters because I just can't keep thinking up new headlines for him. So this is what he's written, and I think actually he makes some really interesting points here, and this will be a fun conversation. Omar writes in, entertainment lacks remembrance now. Hi, Rob and Mike. Road tripping is a new thing, so I'll try getting used to it. There's a vote of confidence. Thanks, Omar.
Wow. Thanks, buddy.
Anyway, he goes, something I think that's now a problem is that entertainment lacks remembrance. And what I mean is the movies and TV shows now don't have anything about them which people will remember in years and decades to come like they did before, even when they're good. Looking at more recent shows which are popular, like all the MCU shows, Stranger Things, Queen's Gambit, Better Call Saul, etc., as popular as they are, they probably won't be remembered long down the line, the way shows like the original Twilight Zone, I Love Lucy, Mary Tyler Moore Show, Andy Griffith Show, etc. all have. I have a feeling if those older shows came out today, I'm sure they would have an audience, but they wouldn't be remembered down the line the way they would compared to when they originally came out. And that's going to be one of the first things I'm going to want to talk about, but I'll keep going. Movies are like that too. To name a few examples, like the MCU and Fast and Furious franchises and hit movies like A Quiet Place and Knives Out, they're not movies people will remember down the line. However, movies from the classic Hollywood era, from Howard Hawks, Frank Capra, Alfred Hitchcock, Billy Wilder, John Huston, William Wyler, etc., those are all still remembered even after all these decades. If any of their iconic movies came out today, they probably wouldn't have any remembrance from people compared to when they originally came out. The same thing with the new Hollywood filmmakers and their movies like Richard Donner, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Robert Zemeckis, James Cameron, etc. If something like Lethal Weapon, The Omen, Terminator 1 and 2, Back to the Future, Star Wars, E.T., Jaws, Indiana Jones, etc. came out today, I'm sure they would be hits, but they would not be remembered as well compared to when they first came out. Even recent movies from directors who made iconic movies in the past can't make movies now which will be remembered down the line. For example, Steven Spielberg, Robert Zemeckis, and Ridley Scott's current work lack remembrance like their older films do, like Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Alien, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Jurassic Park, Saving Private Ryan, etc. That's just something I find to be a problem now, where entertainment doesn't get remembered years down the line like it used to, even when the entertainment now is good. Thanks, live long and prosper, Omar. Well, what do you think?
Well,
what do you think about that, Rob?
I think that there's actually, I think he's right, but I think that there's an easy answer for that. And the easy answer is the world, like so many other things, the world has changed for entertainment.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing that has changed is that it used to be all of these things he brought up. We watched them over and over and over and over and over again on television.
Yes.
Because we only had 3 networks. And there was syndication. Maybe you had 1 or 2 other networks in various regions. And so, like, I know for me, I watched the original Star Trek every weekday for 15 years. I watched Twilight Zone every weekend for the same amount of time. And we watched these things over and over again. Even movies, my favorite movies like War of the Worlds or Godzilla films when I was a kid, I got to see them over and over again because they would air repeatedly over the course of a year in sci-fi theater.
Yeah. Yep.
And so we only had three ABC, NBC, and CBS, and then I had Channel 11 and later Channel 13. And then in the 80s, we were one of the first adopters of, we didn't have cable, but we had a satellite on our roof. So I could watch movies on cable. We would watch them over and over again. And then there was VHS. And people would watch their favorite movies over and over and over again. Now, there's so much content that you can't even keep up. I mean, everyone's falling behind with shows that they might want to watch. And to watch them a second and third time is almost unheard of.
Right.
And so the reason that things are remembered or not remembered is hell. I don't even remember a streaming show I watched a month ago because I've moved on to the next. And these things do not live in your imagination or subconscious the way they used to. Like, look, man, I could tell you. I mean, I still can tell you that the names of every episode title of the original series. Right. Whether it's Requiem for Methuselah, or Who Mourns for Adonais, or Is There in Truth No Beauty, The Doomsday Machine, The Immunity Syndrome, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. I mean, imagine those kinds of titles and being a kid and remembering those titles. Hell, I know more about Star Trek than I remember about my second grade history lessons.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
And I think that there is actually something to be said for that, because that kind of repetition and that kind of remembrance, I mean, the things that live on in our minds and our subconscious, you know, even movies today. I used to watch movies that I loved over and over again. Now I do sure and to watch that, you know, why would I, when there's something, watch All That Jazz for the 58th time? Well, I'll tell you, because All That Jazz is great. There's been nothing that's come close to it since 1979, and I learn a lot more watching All That Jazz than I do for most things that are made today, but that's because the world is a different place.
Right.
The question is, Mike, is it a better place or a worse place? And I would say this. Unfortunately, people now are more interested in themselves than the world outside and beyond them. And in order, when you watch those things over and over again, you thought about them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was very contemplative of various situations in Twilight Zone episodes or movies that I loved. I would spend a lot of time thinking about the plights of those characters. Nowadays, we don't think as much about entertainment. We think about ourselves.
Right.
And I think that in a way, I mean, I can't draw a line, I can't prove this. This is just a theory that I have. But I think that a lot of the anger and a lot of the vitriol that you see in online discourse and in our politics is because we don't spend enough time thinking about the world and the universe beyond ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We now have become the ultimate navel gazers. We're not using our imaginations to leap beyond our circumstance. Whereas, I mean, I had people used to say I had my head in the clouds. And that's true. And you know what? I wonder now, Mike, if that isn't such a bad way to be.
Right.
Because you're thinking about things more than focusing back on yourself and watching likes rack up on Instagram.
Right. So I guess the way that I'd look at this, I don't disagree very much at all with your observations there, Rob, as usual. However,
it would be Rob's observations, Mike.
Well, your observations, which, by the way, the next time you're in your Prius, you need to figure out where you're going to put this name. But we have consensus among Imagination Connoisseurs that your vehicle should now be called Robtimus Prime.
It should be called what?
Robtimus Prime. Instead of Optimus
Prime. Robtimus Prime. That's the name of the car.
There we go.
That name. Optimus Prime.
But anyway, I digress. Here's my observation out of all of that, out of what you said, because I tend to agree that with the frequency of viewing and the frequency of exposure of that media, and you have to keep in mind there are a couple reasons for it. First off, programming was expensive to make. There wasn't nearly as much of it, but there was still the same number of hours in the day. And so your network affiliates would fill their uncommitted airtime with reruns. And so you saw a lot of reruns, and very often the same reruns market to market, because only a few shows had enough episodes, the magic number being 72, to be able to be effective in daily strip reruns. Okay? So that's part of the reason why the shows like Andy Griffith and Twilight Zone and Star Trek and I Love Lucy and The Honeymooners and some of these other classic television shows really became ingrained through repetition with their markets. Now, here's the other thing I'd point out is that with repetitive viewing, whether it's a TV show or a movie, which, by the way, if you're spending $60 on a videotape, you're not going to watch that movie once and put the tape on the shelf, right? You're going to watch it over and over and over again also. But with repetitive viewing comes and frequent viewing of a certain cast, of a certain situation, of a certain storyline or whatever. With that comes familiarity, and that familiarity eventually goes to intimacy. There is an intimate relationship that you have with those characters. And that is why, as a kid, watching Star Trek 5 days a week after I came home from school, when we went outside to play, one of us was going to be Mr. Spock, and one of us was going to be Captain Kirk, and we were going to fight Klingons and roll down the hill. That's why we made our Legos into phasers. That's why that level of intimacy with a franchise creates an emotional bond that when we see stuff kind of drudged back up 50 years down the road and not given the kind of love and respect that we have baked into our own personal relationship with that brand, it can make people upset. And I would posit this, that with the way social media has grown, with the amount of content, programming TV shows, streaming shows, movies, things like that. With all of this stimulus that's out there, all of these stories that are out there, it's very hard to develop a level of intimacy with characters and with stories. And so what serves as the proxy for that? Well, if you're on social media, it's because you're the only updates you see every single day. You're the only show you watch every day, because that all changes on your social media feed too, based on some algorithm designed by someone else. So I think you're right in that, a big part of the uncivility in public discourse, and a big part of the problem that we're seeing in all sorts of industries, is a failure for people to be able to connect, because they have not learned how to become interested in other people, whether they're fictional characters in a TV show or whether they're real people that they play golf with or go camping with or see at school or whatever it is. It's an interesting problem, and there's no easy solution to it. The only other thing I would say too is that with this diversity of content, this diversity of programming issue, which it really is an issue, it's not made any better as you continue to shorten what qualifies as a full season of TV. You remember, Rob, when I Love Lucy came out, I think the first season of I Love Lucy had 50 episodes in it. That was a weekly show. They had a new show every week except for 2 holiday weeks. By the time Star Trek came out in the mid-'60s, an average show season was 26 episodes. And now we're wondering whether or not we're going to get 6 or 7 episodes of this last season of Stranger Things. I think that while the programming is good, the stories are interesting and everything, it makes it hard to remember what's going on when you only get a diminished number of episodes of over a highly intensified period. God forbid they drop all the episodes at once. You can binge the whole thing in a day and a half and you're done with it. I mean, there's no way to create that bond between the franchise and the viewer like there used to be. I don't know. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with all of that. I mean, it's such a look. The relationship we have, human civilization, is constantly in a state of flux, and the times change, and our relationship to our own entertainment changes. I mean, Mike, I long for the days to watch gladiators torn apart by animals in the Colosseum in Rome, but I missed out on that one.
Well, except for that one episode of Star Trek original series, right? Bread
and circuses.
There you go.
But even that, it was a painted backdrop. It wasn't really the Colosseum. And I feel like history really let me down, because I was born in this. On the other hand, I got to see Star Wars opening weekend.
There you go.
So maybe I'm better off.
So are you not amused? I just have to ask.
Entertained.
So, are you not entertained? That's okay.
I am entertained. I mean, but it all changes. I mean, I think but I will say this: entertainment gives us something to contemplate and to imagine and think about. And I think that we, certainly here in America, have become less imaginative, less tolerant, less able to think outside of ourselves, because we have more time to. I mean, I think we're stewing more in our own juices,
right?
And I think that really compelling entertainment gives us something that inherently makes us think outside of ourselves,
right?
Because you're contemplating your favorite characters.
Well, and that's been the purpose of storytelling for the last 5,000 years, isn't it? I mean, I remember seeing a comment, I think, on one of our YouTube shows or whatever, where someone was asking about, the amount of political, social agenda setting and stuff like that in shows, and my point when I responded back was that storytelling, since there's been storytelling, there's always been a purpose to try to either convince or sway or interest people in other outside points of view, to make them expand that thought. There is a pleasure that's derived from learning something new, from understanding something that you might not have understood when you walked in. And when you consider the fact that theater actually, has a firm foundation in royal courts, where farce and performance very often went hand in hand with policy making, there's a reason for that, and so but the difference, of course, the point I was making is that there's a difference between entertaining and people divining or deriving a message from it, whatever that social message is that you may want to go ahead and give, and giving people a lecture. Lectures are inherently not entertaining. In fact, I wrote an entire paper about how you could make history class more interesting and more entertaining if you structured the 2-hour history class more like a made-for-TV movie. And considered the peaks and valleys of viewer attention, But that being said, you don't want to go to a movie, you don't want to watch a TV show and be beat over the head with some sort of lecture, some sort of lesson. You want to be able to understand where the characters are coming from. You want to see them doing interesting things. You want to really develop, again, that level of connection, of intimacy with what's going on, so that you can then, and you derive your own meaning from that, I think. So I think Omar's question was really, really good, taken in kind of the meta, larger sense. I think that there are some things that, if Omar continues to curate his viewing and watch, he's got a really incredibly diverse area of interest when it comes to classic films and things like that, which both entertain me, because sometimes he doesn't quite hit on his argument on all cylinders, but I really appreciate the fact that he brings up directors like Howard Hawks and John Huston and Frank Capra and all these guys. They're the classic Hollywood movie directors, but there are so many forgotten films from the 30s, 40s, and 50s that I think the other half of what I kind of wanted to talk about with this is there's a shelf life to entertainment, isn't there? I mean, pop culture, I think you've said, has a half-life of about 20 years. And it's to be expected that our TV, radio, music, and film entertainment will eventually recall less and less from days gone by. I'm not sure how many people have a favorite silent movie anymore. But when we were growing up, Rob, I don't know, I used to go to Shakeys Pizza, and that's all they played were silent movies, because it couldn't, it was not unusual to watch a movie from the 19 teens or the 1920s in 1970, because that was only 40 or 50 years ago. I mean, we're watching shows from 40 or 50 years ago and not thinking a whole lot about it, but those shows aren't going to be around for much longer, I don't think. I mean, there will be a few, but
there is a Shakeys close by where I live now. I used to love Shakeys. I'd love to hear you group. Hey, we went to Shakeys. They were always dark.
Yep.
They had the long tables with the long benches that you would sit at.
Yep.
And they would project.
Yeah.
Film reels of silent movies.
Yep. And
I loved it.
Yeah. Well, and as you know, because I've told you this before, but one of my first jobs in advertising after I finally graduated from college, one of my first jobs was in writing the Black Hawk Films catalog. So I got to know all those Max Roach films and all of the Laurel and Hardy classics and all the Little Rascals. And then they got bought by Republic Pictures. So I started dealing with the guys from Republic, and we put together all these amazing movie serial, compilations and stuff like that. And I have a very soft spot in my heart for media from the 20s, 30s, and 40s, which is why I'm such a big Golden Age comics guy. It's why no matter how bad Black Adam is, I'm going to go see it just because I got to see Dr. Fate on screen. So that's just me.
Yeah, well, I hope it's good.
I do too.
Although I have to say, none of the trailers, including the new one that dropped today, gives me much hope that it is. I have seen, I find it fascinating that even today's Black Adam trailer that had some clever action beats in it, what's the story?
Right.
You know, I'm tired. Look, the visual spectacle I now take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to see in a trailer is what is the character and what is the story.
Right.
And I thought it was the most bare bones we've seen now. These two trailers for Black Adam. I have to say, I'm looking at this and I'm like, how is this? This looks to me to be mediocre. And the idea of that some superheroes don't kill, I do. Well, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that mean? And show me the results. Give me something in the trailer that makes me want to run out and go see Black Adam. Because right now, Mike, I don't care.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't care. I watched this trailer and I'm like, whatever. You know, the funny thing about the MCU, and you know, people take this now for granted, but the MCU is never about the spectacle or the action. It's always about the characters.
It's always about the characters.
You love those characters.
Yep.
And everyone like poo-poos. Look, even now, Shang-Chi was incredibly enjoyable because when you meet Shang-Chi, you're his buddy.
Right.
You're hanging out with him and his best friend.
Right.
I don't care what they did. You know what? After seeing the first 20 minutes of Shang-Chi and getting to know them, I would hang out with them if all they did was roam around San Francisco and sing karaoke.
Yeah, I would have been happy just to see the shenanigans they got into just as valets at wherever it was that they were working, the restaurant or whatever. Where
Yeah,
they just,
you know what? Absolutely, and that would have been a good movie.
Yeah, it could have been hilarious. Of course, I think Awkwafina's very funny, anyway. So I know she's an acquired taste, but I enjoy her stuff. So that's just me.
Yeah.
So, and so while we're talking about trailers, am I right? Has Beta Ray Bill appeared in that in the latest Thor: Love and Thunder trailer yet?
No.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I was seeing something online claiming that Beta Ray Bill was in it, and that's like I watched him like, Beta Ray Bill's not in this thing. So, I mean, they had a sculpture of his head in Ragnarok, but I do not believe that Beta Ray Bill is in this next movie. So, although we are kind of getting a Korg fest, aren't we, out of the MCU here over the next couple movies?
Yes, we are. I mean, I can't wait. We'll see. I mean, look, I'm really looking forward to Love and Thunder. It looks bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be fun. I mean, if you look at that trailer, all the memorable moments in that trailer are not the spectacle. It's Thor himself.
Right.
It's his reactions, his lines of dialogue, because we know him.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why we're tuning in. Because we want to see what shenanigans Thor gets up to.
Oh, yeah. No, that's exactly right.
You could watch that movie. If you made a movie, I've often said, after seeing Age of Ultron, I go, I want to make my dinner with Avengers instead of Andre.
Yeah.
Where you do a 2-hour movie with all the Avengers at a dinner party, and you keep shuffling between the characters and their interplay and the conversations they get up to.
Yeah.
You know, one of my favorite scenes in Endgame is when Natasha talks to Captain America.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Steve Rogers and Natasha's conversation about what they're doing. That took probably 3 or 4 minutes of screen time. That was a great moment. That's the thing about the MCU that people don't get.
Right.
It's not about the superheroics. It's about the characters.
Well,
and when I watched that Black Adam trailer, basically I'm watching Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson say Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson things. I don't know who these characters. I mean, they're saying I might as well have been watching a WWF promo.
Right. Well, but your observation is spot on, and it is sort of one of the major differences between the two comic brands, isn't it? I mean, you take a look at the way Stan Lee worked on Fantastic Four and the work that he did on those other breakthrough titles in the 1960s. And the thing that made those comics different from the DC comics that were dominating coming out of the 1950s is that Lee found great humor and light in writing about the relationships between the messy relationships inside the family for Fantastic Four, showing that Peter Parker, even though he was a superhero, was constantly getting in a bind over, very often not of his own making. He either had a mean boss or a girlfriend who refused to understand him, or an aunt that was constantly, just a hair's breadth away from figuring out who he really was. That kind of, it was those personal moments, those personality moments, and the continuing storylines that made Marvel so different from DC. Because DC, a lot of those guys, the stories were pretty much the same issue to issue. It's like just a new gimmick every month. So, interesting stuff. So, Rob, what else do we have to say for Omar here? Anything else to wrap up, you think? Or?
Well, I think that, look, we live in an evolutionary time as all times are. Mm-hmm. And I think that our culture is now, with the rise of social media, everyone has become the star of their own story.
Right.
And they're more interested in their own plots and their own canon, their own existence, which I think has diminished us in a way because, frankly, most people aren't that interesting.
Right.
And even though we all think we are. And anybody who's lived in LA for any time, who works in the entertainment industry, has heard from other people, you should make a story about my office place because we're all very wacky people.
Yeah.
Thank God you can point to the office and say, your office is not as funny as Steve Carell's office was, as Dunder Mifflin was. So, and if it isn't, then you're wrong.
I think this is interesting. So when Ricky Gervais came up with The Office, when he and Stephen Merchant actually came up and pitched the idea of The Office, it was based on Gervais's experience in an office similar to that, where he worked for 7 years. There's essentially 7 years of research that went into making The Office, or at least the UK version of The Office, which is part of the reason I think why it hit so well. And then the other thing that really worked about that is that Gervais and Merchant insisted on doing this as a mockumentary type show, and they insisted the BBC not let on that it was a comedy. So when The Office, I don't know if you've ever heard this story or not, but apparently when The Office debuted in the UK, people were shocked at how poorly managed this office was, and whoever this David Brent guy was, he needed to be eliminated because this was just absolutely a horrible shit show that they just could not believe was airing on the BBC, and that was all part of the gag. It was so realistic, it struck home with so many people that they thought it was a real documentary when it first ran.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, no, Gervais takes great pleasure in kind of relating that story. And as he should. Obviously the American iteration of it, by then people knew what The Office was, so they weren't taken in the same way, but it's absolutely brilliant. But and your point is, not everyone's office is as crazy as The Office. In fact, you remember, I've got a friend who has an interesting Vietnam War era story that I thought, oh God, this could be an interesting movie. I talked to a writer. We did a couple of interviews with the guy, and he told his whole story. And we walked out of there. We got done with the Zoom sessions, and I'm looking at it, kind of going like, it's not really quite as interesting as I thought it would be. We're not very good as the stars of our own story all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
So, present company excluded, of course, Rob. So, anyway, I hate to do this to you, man, but we need to kind of cut things off a little early because I need to finish getting my reports pulled together so I can run off to my meeting.
No worries,
So are we
man.
good? I do appreciate you taking some time out of your day, and we did do a couple of marathon calls here over the last few days anyway. We've got a couple episodes over an hour long. So this is a good one, and thanks so much to Omar for that letter. Don't forget, everyone, you can send us a letter if you go to the postgeeksingularity.com homepage. There's a big fat button right on the homepage, right underneath all of the little pictures at the top. It says send a show a letter. You click on that, you pull down Road Trippin' with RMB from the drop-down menu, type in your message, send it to us, and Rob and I will talk about it on our next stream, which will be tomorrow if you're up for it. You good with that?
I'm good with that, Mike.
That is awesome. Well, we can go ahead and do that call again tomorrow then, my friend. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, Mike, I'll talk with you then.
All right, thanks, buddy. Talk to you soon. Well, that was a fun one, wasn't it? I'm sorry that it had to end as quickly as it did, but it did come to an end, and that means we're done with yet another road trip with Robert Meyer Burnett. Road Trippin' is a production of Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited LLC and is transmitted throughout the Post-Geek Singularity from our studios in downtown Mayberry. You can find Road Trippin' on your favorite podcasting platform and our website, postgeeksingularity.com. Yeah, downtown Mayberry. You guys have no idea how close to the truth that is. Oh my. All right. Don't forget, we also post links to our podcasts on all of our social media accounts. Say them with me now. You'll find the PGS on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, Tumblr, and Discord. You can access that Discord server by going to our website, clicking on any of the links that say join our conversation online, or you can join the conversation online right off our homepage. Go to the homepage. It's that first button on the left-hand side after the news headlines and everything. Go ahead and click it. You'll find dozens of discussion boards with hundreds of imagination connoisseurs just like you, just like me, all wanting to talk about the things we love, whether it's science fiction, fantasy, horror, pop culture, maybe even Mayberry RFD. I don't know. I've got Mayberry on the brain. Thanks, Omar. Thank you for that. You can also sign up for our email newsletters. We send those out on an almost daily basis. Some weeks we do better than others, but, I keep trying. Anyway, you can sign up for any of our newsletters, all of our newsletters. You can modify your subscription at any time. There's no cost for any of it, and we certainly don't want to fill your inbox with unnecessary mail, but it's a fun way to keep in touch. And that brings me to my next point. We want to hear from you. That's right. Send us letters. You can do that by clicking Send the Show a Letter link, or by going into our main navigation, the Contact Us button. Click on that. You've got lots of options. You can send us a review. You can send us a letter. You can send us an extra take. Heck, you can even pitch us a new idea for a show if you want to be famous on YouTube or a podcast or something. Just let us know. Let us know what you're interested in, because that's the fun thing about the Post-Geek Singularity. These are fans, folks, who are producing this content, and we hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy this road trip and podcast. They're lots of fun to do. Rob's a great guy, and he's really, really interesting. I hope you find that to be the case as well. We're going to have a chance to hear it again tomorrow, because we're going to make an all-new episode for Thursday. So tune in. This is Mike Bodden. I'll talk to you later.